feeling you'd try and go to the other side.
I'd like to call our meeting to order this evening. This is the Syracuse City Council regular business meeting of December 11th, 2018, convening at 7 p.m. Just for the record, the council met an hour earlier in a work session. We welcome you here. It's good to see you here. If you're counting, it's 14 days. And the big day comes. There seems like there ought to be a song that says the 14th day of Christmas. I wonder what would be in there. Anyway, we're glad to have you here. We welcome you here. We love participation in these meetings. It's actually one of the more enjoyable things that we do is to meet with the residents of the city, and we love it. I've asked Councilman Peterson if he'd lead us in invocation or a thought, and then Councilman Savage if he'd lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening.
Father in heaven, we're thankful for the many blessings that we enjoy here in this city, in this state, and in this country. We're grateful for the opportunity to meet together tonight and take care of business of the city. We're grateful for the safety that we enjoy and those who help keep us safe. Please bless us to have that guidance as we make decisions tonight, especially as we make a decision to have a new council member join us. We also pray for those within our community that are in need and help us to look for ways to help them out. We say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Please rise. Say the Pledge of Allegiance after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, fellows. I appreciate that. Council, I'm looking for a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
I have a motion by Councilman Mon, second by Councilman Savage. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. Item number 2, public comment. We'd like to make you aware that at every one of our meetings we offer 2 opportunities for members of the public to address the council on any issue that you think or deem important for the council to be aware of and to give us information that you think we may not have. We love hearing that comment. We would ask you to limit your comments to things that aren't already on the agenda by way of public hearing. There will be time this evening for those items for you also to express your concerns during those public hearings. We'd also ask that you come to the rostrum that's here in the front and address the council. Pull the microphone down where you can be heard. If you would announce your name and your place of residence, and would you limit your comments to 3 minutes so that we can accommodate as many as would like to address the council. So I would open that now, open public comment period. If you'd like to address the council on any issue, we'd love to hear from you. Hearing and seeing none, I'll close that. There will be another opportunity late in the meeting for that same opportunity to do so. This evening we have our Award of Excellence that is sponsored by our local Chamber of Commerce. Judy Barrett is here tonight representing the Chamber. She is the Executive Secretary of that group. Judy, do you want to take over and recognize our young folks?
This is my first time doing this, so anyway, I guess I'm supposed to speak into that. Our Students of the Month, both from Syracuse Arts Academy, is Kemuel Cullimore and Chloe Ann Mormino. We'd like to congratulate both of you, ask you to come up here. Some teachers, or I assume teachers, made these little blurbs, so let's talk about Kemuel first. Kemuel is a very intelligent student and is a great leader. He is serving as a student body president and has been a student body officer since 7th grade. This year as president, he has been responsible for running ASB meetings, leading his peers, speaking in assemblies, and making decisions. Camille has participated in multiple community service acts over the last 3 years, including working at the Layton and Ogden food banks. He is enjoyed and liked by his fellow students as a leader and his teachers for his knowledge and attitude in the classroom. Learning and doing his best are important to him. Camille is kind and compassionate, and you will find him in class helping those who struggle to succeed. He is always willing to have a stimulating intellectual conversation with his classmates. This is a big contribution since conversing over material learned is necessary for retention. Camille is also always positive, willing to help others, well-mannered, and gracious to all. What a great accomplishment he's done. Chloe says, or the teachers say about her, Chloe is an especially hardworking student, tackling problems head-on with a clear head and a mature attitude. Chloe is an ambassador at the school and part of student leadership. She has been involved with multiple community service opportunities as a student in leadership. She contributes to the school by helping others with understanding information and guidance. Chloe is also always upbeat and spirited to have in the classroom. She works with other students as a peer tutor, supporting students who are struggling academically. Chloe is a very accomplished student who is always eager to learn. She sets an awesome example of high academic and personal standards for all to see. We'd like to give these two great students some certificates. There's a little Google Play certificate for each of you. Chloe? Thank you for your Stay here. I think the chamber would like to shake hands with you, have some picture opportunities here.
This evening, we'd also like to represent representatives, and including our entire fire department. Chief, are you here? Do you want to take the rostrum for a minute?
Council and Mayor, thanks for freeing up some time in the agenda today to allow us to recognize the firefighters of the Syracuse Fire Department for their hard work and dedication to the wildland program this past season. According to the National Situation Report, this past year in the Great Basin area, which consists of Utah, Nevada, Idaho, parts of Arizona, and Wyoming, there were 2,780 working fires, which burned nearly 2.1 million acres of land. To put that into perspective, that's 3,281 square miles, or roughly 78 Antelope Islands. Since July of this year, our wildland team deployed for a combined 170 days to 20 different fires in the Great Basin area. This includes a special deployment to California as part of the Utah State Task Force to fight the destructive Woolsey Fire, which resulted in 295,000 evacuations, nearly 10,000 acres burned, including 1,643 structures, and the loss of 3 lives. If I could have the fire department, those who were able to to be here tonight. Stand up so we can recognize them.
Thank
Our
you.
wildland program relies on many factors for its continued success. This includes our firefighters who are willing to deploy for up to 14 days at a time or longer, which would be typically is Captain Bybee and Engineer Holman, who are here tonight. This also includes our firefighters who stay behind to work their shifts when they're gone. It also includes our administrative staff, so Deputy Chief Hamblin and Shar, who's our administrative professional, who work to make sure the paperwork's done for all of this. It also includes our elected officials to give us the opportunity to do this and to support us in that. Finally, and most importantly, it includes our families. The families of our firefighters, they offer the continued support while their loved ones are gone and they spend so many nights away from home. And that's the ones that deploy plus the ones that come back and cover. So tonight, it's important to recognize them, and I'm completely grateful for what they do for our city, and to also recognize that the success of our program has so many people involved in it. So thank you guys.
Thank you so much. We appreciate all you do in keeping us safe. I'm surprised that any of you can stand after last night. I'm surprised that your muscles will let you stand, but please know that we appreciate you. We recognize the sacrifice that it is to your families, not only those, Officer Bybee, Captain Bybee and Dan, that with your immediate families, but those others that are called in to work at that time when you're gone. We know that isn't without sacrificing your family, so thank you. You have an appreciative council and an appreciative community for what you do, and thank you. And thank you for recognizing them, Chief. We really appreciate that. Item number 5, the approval of minutes. October 23, 2018 work session and November 13th, 2018 business meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the minutes of October 23, 2018 and November 13th, 2018 business meeting.
Second.
Second by Councilman Peterson. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Items of common consent, and I will speak just a little bit about them for the benefit of the audience that's here, that they will understand what we're enacting. Proposed ordinance 1825 amending section 1030-040 of the Syracuse City Municipal Code pertaining to animal keeping regulations. This brings the city into more common compliance with the county with animal control. Item number B, proposed ordinance 1826 amending section 112085 of the city code pertaining to permitting parking zones near Syracuse High. Beginning in June of this year until just recently, we've been working with an issue of parking and providing parking for residents along some roads surrounding the high school where students parking in those areas had prohibited residents from parking. We have worked out a permit situation with the school, and not with the school, but with the residents there to help preserve parking for them. Item number C, proposed ordinance 1827 amending section 1110-105 of the city code pertaining to traffic control devices placement. And these are all just regulatory administrative things that we've worked on in the back. I'd entertain a motion to approve these by common consent.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve by common consent items A, B, and C of agenda item 6.
Thank you, Dave. Have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Savage. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, it stands universally. Now, I'd like to take just a minute and do a little housekeeping procedure. Council, you remember item 9. I'm going to ask for amendment to the agenda. There is a typo on our agenda for item 9. You'll remember item 9 in discussion has been removed from the agenda, but it ended up on here. I'd like, if it would be possible, to have an amendment striking 9 from the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to strike item 9 from our agenda.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a first and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any,
Aye.
any opposed? It will be tabled. Thank you. We'd like now to hold a public hearing. This is an opportunity for the citizens to comment. We've seen a need to do some adjusting of our fee schedules throughout. Steve, do you want to address this quickly so they know, and then I'll open public hearing.
Sure. So we had is this working? You guys hear me okay? It's not working?
I don't hear you anyway.
Testing, testing. I'll talk really loud. So we had our Public Works deep dive last meeting, and we talked about some changes to some fees on for our inspection fees and for our stormwater permit fees. From that discussion, we proposed that we raise the fee for our final inspection fees from an average of $79 per lot to $350 per lot, with the idea that that would go towards funding an additional position later on, not currently, but starting in the next fiscal year, to handle a lot of those final inspection fees for all of our new subdivisions. Also, with the stormwater permit fees, that would change from $50 per application to $50 per lot. Then one other change we've talked about is a traffic evaluation request of $300 per application, with the caveat that if there is a deficiency identified with that traffic evaluation request, that we would refund that money back to the applicant. Those are the changes proposed in this budget opening. This fee schedule amendment.
Okay. Council, you'll have a chance to discuss that in a minute. For the benefit of the public, I now declare that we're in public hearing. If you would like to address the council on these changes, we'd love to hear from you. Hearing and seeing none, I'll close public hearing. Council, do you have any discussion? Anything you'd like to talk about?
I'm just glad that we were bringing these fees in line with, to cover the cost of the actual inspector who's doing the work. So thank you for figuring that out, Robert.
I think we've talked about this, and we understand that it is necessary. So in light of that, I would go ahead and make a motion that we approve proposed resolution R18-38, amending the consolidated fee schedule.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Councilman Peterson. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hearing no opposition, it passed unanimously. Steve, do you want to go on to the next item? Public hearing, proposed resolution R1837, adjusting the Syracuse budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th of 19.
Turn this back on. All right, so for this one, we have a few minor changes to the budget opening. We've talked about these previously also in council meetings. The first one is a $65,000 increase to our RAP tax expense fund for a pavilion over at Centennial Park. That is both for the pavilion and the installation of that pavilion. We also, with that change we just made in the fee schedule, project a $40,000 increase for inspection fees throughout the remainder of this fiscal year, with the idea that that money would be set aside for a vehicle for the position, and then starting in fiscal year 20, those monies would go to pay for the actual person in that position. Those are the two changes to this fee schedule, or this budget opening, that we're proposing tonight.
I would now declare that we're in public hearing. If there is a member of the public, member of our residency, who would like to address this particular action, we'd encourage you to come forward. State your name and place of residence. Hearing and seeing none, I'll close public hearing. Council?
Mayor, I'd make a motion to accept proposed resolution R1837, adjusting the Syracuse city budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2019.
We have a motion from Councilwoman Bolduc. A second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Savage. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, stands unanimous. Let's go to item 10. Noah, are you ready? Thank you, Steve.
Final plat approval. This item is for the final plat approval of Stillwater Phase 5 and 6, which is located approximately 2000 West Parkview Drive, which is near the new roundabout. This is part of the larger residential planned community zone subdivision. There'll be about 11 phases total, around 700 lots. These two phases, Phase 5 will be the standard single-family home product that they're selling, and Phase 6 will be their smaller lot, the 3,500 square foot lot that they're selling, and they're finding good success in selling that, so they're moving along with their final plats. Part of this plat includes some open space that will be dedicated to the city, and also some other open spaces that will be HOA maintained.
Okay. Thank you, Noah. Council, we've been appraised on this, and it has come through the Planning Commission with a favorable nod. Do we need any other discussion? I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we grant final plat approval for Stillwater Phases 5 and 6.
I have a motion from Councilman Peterson,
I'll second that.
second by Councilman Bolduc. Any other discussion?
I can't remember. Is there any staff comments that need to be addressed before we
Have those been resolved?
this?
Yeah, it's recommended that staff comments be addressed before the recording of the plat.
I'd like to amend that to include that all the staff comments be completed before.
Do you see that as a favorable amendment?
Yeah.
Okay. Let it stand. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay. Want to go take the next one, Noah?
This next item is another subdivision plat for Ninigret North 3 subdivision. This is located off of 193 near the Syracuse Arts Academy satellite campus. This is a very small 2-lot commercial subdivision that includes 300 South being extended to the west. With those 2 lots, Lot 2 will have a mortuary built on it, and Lot 1 will be for future development.
Council, again, we've seen this one. It's come with a favorable nod from the Planning Commission. Any other discussion? I'd entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'd make a motion to accept or approve the subdivision plat for Ninigret North 3 subdivision located approximately 1585 West, 300 South.
We have a first, have a second.
I'll second that.
Second one by Councilman Peterson. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Stands unanimous. Brody, do you want to take 12?
Sure, thank you. This is a resolution adopting the strategic operational plan that we discussed on November 30th. There are some amendments that were made to it following our discussion that night. If there are any questions, I can answer them.
Comments? I just want to say that I really appreciated the process, and I'm glad that the city is looking at individual departments for goals and such and stating them for the city and residents to see. So thank you.
Brody, could I get you just to take a minute for the benefit of the residents here explaining what this is?
Sure. So this is a strategic plan for the city's operations. The city has a mission statement, and this document boils it down into actual nuts and bolts of how the city's going to operate. Over the last few months, the city has developed various vision statements for each department on what they want to see from each department. And from those vision statements, we've worked together to have a strategic operation plan over the next 5 years to put certain priorities in writing so that we can focus those every budget year so that our budget is aligned with our priorities. And that boils down into the day-to-day tasks that we as staff have to operate every day. And so this document is used to help guide that. So,
Thank you. Any further discussion, Council? I might add that this is a tremendous tool to management. I think it's going to be a great tool for management. I'd entertain a motion.
I'm glad we took this step. I mean, 3 years ago, we set out with a new vision, and this is another step in refining that and making it happen. So I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion that we approve ordinance R 18-39, adopting the Strategic Operations Plan.
Thank you, David. Have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Savage. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Stands unanimous. Brody, would you take the next?
Sure. So this is a resolution authorizing Mayor Gailey to submit a letter of support for what's known as the third quarter local option sales tax. Prior to this meeting, we were in work session and we discussed this at length. For the benefit of everybody, what it is Davis County has the option to institute a quarter-cent sales tax that can only be used for the purpose of transportation. And we discussed the pros and cons of this. What this decision is tonight, if the council wants to, they can authorize Mayor Gailey to issue a letter of support or of not support, or of conditional support. And it's been requested by other cities in the county and by the county to some extent to have a discussion with cities to see if there is support for this sales tax or not. So that's why it's been brought forth. It is up to the council to decide if they even want to weigh in and give a letter at all. But this is on the agenda tonight for them to consider.
So I will open discussion with the council to continue our discussion from the work session.
I think it's good that we talked about this, but kind of where we left off, this is a decision for the county commissioners. They don't have to do what we say or recommend, and they know how we feel about it. So I kind of feel like we ought to leave it with them.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I really appreciate the fact that you came. But they don't need a letter of support from us to vote for this. I trust the commissioners to vote one way or the other. And I'm not sure. I would not want to send a letter unless we're all unanimous. If this is and I don't know what it is. We haven't made any even straw poll, but if it's a 3-2 vote, one way or the other, I don't feel comfortable sending that on to the county unless we're unanimous.
I really want them to enforce the maintenance part of this as well. I think that's just really important for our little cities. And apparently that's not part of this current writing, but we don't get to choose that either.
Yeah, and for that reason, I don't think there's any reason to say that we are pro something that isn't even allowed right now and they're hoping to get changed. They need to go get that changed first.
And one suggestion would be to do like was suggested, send them a letter of urging to encourage that, because I honestly don't see them not passing this as a commission. I mean, one way or another, I think that's what they're going to do, and we need to urge them to change that to include maintenance.
There's the other part of that. There is no guarantee that any of these funds will actually come to Syracuse. Unlike a lot of these other sales taxes, we are guaranteed a share of that. And it could also be said that all of it will come here or some portion. But just where I don't feel like this is really our decision, and I don't feel like we really have a say. Do we have a vote in how the money is spent as part of the COG, which, remind me what that stands for? Council of Governments. They make the decision, but ultimately we don't really have a say. So this really seems like this is a county subject, county topic that they should really address. And if I had to vote, I probably would say no, just because the statement was made that, since we haven't passed this yet, there's so many millions that the county has not received, and I'm going to call that a win. So I just don't think, I would either say not support it or just not submit a letter at all.
I'm going to make the motion, Mr. Mayor, that we just leave this up to the county. This is not our prerogative anyway. And I would be more respectful of them not coming into the city and telling me what I'm supposed to do and what I'm not supposed to do. So I'm going to do the same to them and make the motion that we don't tell them what to do.
And that's a motion.
Yep.
You have a second?
I'll second that.
You have a first and a second. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I want to just clarify one thing, and this is probably for you, Mayor. It was asked in the work session, does us saying nothing or does us saying something
Hurt us.
or help us in the COG? And the answer was no, but I just want to verify with you that you feel like we're okay with this, that are all cities getting behind this and we're going to be the odd one out?
Yes.
No, I don't think so, but I would like to correct one statement that we have no representative in COG. We do.
No, I did say we have a vote in COG.
Uh,
But I do want to be clear, if this is passed, I just want to make sure that we have a strong voice in there that is really kind of pushing to get a lot of these projects that we have locally that need attention, that we work those.
I do feel like we've had some money from COG to help us quite a bit over the last few years. So I think they will look favorably on us as far as some of our projects go.
Well, I just will tell you, since I've been involved with it, that I have seen more and more of the breaking down of municipal boundaries and it becoming more of a regional government agency than just that we're there to represent our individual cities.
That's encouraging.
That I think that body is becoming more of a, let's see what we can do for Davis County, all of Davis, because it really is a win if anything comes to Davis County for all of us because of the employment and spending of money in Davis County. So I'm open to do whatever you'd want me to do. I wanted direction, that's why it's on here. I didn't want to do this without your nod. And it sounds like, Brody, that we don't have the nod.
Well, we have
Okay.
a motion.
You have a motion to second.
Yeah, there'd be a motion to, oh, there is a motion on the table.
There's a
Yeah.
Yeah,
motion on the
we
table.
just need to vote on the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. I don't have to run spell check.
I'm grateful for your representation at COG. Mayor, thank you.
I think it's a good place. It's I see it as an important place for us to be, and I am very happy that we have representatives from those that have been involved in municipal government now at the commission level that will help us. That will be great. Bro, you want to take item 14?
Sure. Item 14 is authorization to enter into an interlocal agreement with Davis County Library. As you know, they are expanding the library across the street here. In order to do that during construction, they'll need a temporary easement essentially to stage their materials and equipment during construction. What this agreement does is it lays out where they can put materials and equipment. The staging area to the north is outlined on page 255 of your packet, which is essentially the north parking lot just north of their building, and a portion of the community center parking lot to the east of their building. In addition, we are allowing the vacant lot here east of City Hall to be a staging area. What they will do upon completion of the project is they will repair or refinish any parking surface so that it is at equal or better condition than when they started. And they will also complete the sidewalk on the eastern side of the vacant lot. They have agreed to finish that and complete that segment for students and people to walk to and from, which would benefit the library too. As patrons use the library, they walk there too.
Okay. Any clarification that you need, council?
I'm excited about that piece of negotiation that you got that sidewalk.
I'm a little concerned. looking at the final draft of this, it's summarized by saying that they will have the exclusive right to this easement. I'm leery of that word. I think that we have no idea as a city what might happen, what might come up, what emergency we might face. And my experience with that group is that if they have that in writing, they would take full advantage of it if need be. And I think that we have to protect the rights of the city. It is city property. So I would vote that we remove the word exclusive and replace it with something that says, you know, our intent is that you can use this space provided there's no, you know, extenuating circumstances, because we have to protect that.
Mayor, isn't, or Paul, maybe you can address this, isn't that use of the word exclusive just to protect their legal ramifications? Like if somebody were to go onto that property during their construction to protect their equipment and such? I mean, please.
Yes, so this being public property, generally the public are allowed to come and go across it. With the exclusion that would be built into the easement, that would allow them to put up a fence and keep people out of their construction zone, so it keeps people from getting injured or the county dealing with trespassers and people like that. So that's why we have the exclusive provision in there. It's really for their protection and ours too. If they have exclusive control over it, then if someone is injured, then the city's not going to be responsible for it.
Thank you.
But again, there's the what if. What if we need some of this space? And since we last talked about this in work session, this area has grown by half a parking lot in the side of the rec center. And that's concerning because we utilize that parking. We're under served by parking in that area to begin with. I realize that in order to accomplish the construction, we're going to have to give up some area. I totally recognize that. But, you know, we're adding area and then we're saying, look, you have the exclusive right. I think that's so long as it's in the city's best interest or whatever, because if there's an emergency and we need to access that space, it's our land.
Right, and I think I can speak to that, and then I actually have a question that maybe Paul can answer on your second point. On the first point, from their previous drawing, they had additional area to the north. They were actually going to take the next 2 levels of parking. And in discussing this with them, what we were able to do is sort of trade off. We actually ended up with more parking spaces with this alignment than the previous alignment. The reason why we felt like this one might actually work is they actually have to resurface our parking lot on that area that's fenced in, because they have to change the grading a little bit to match the stormwater with their property. And so they actually have to do some resurfacing. And we felt like if they're going to be tearing that up anyway, they can just use it as part of their staging. Plus we get more parking spaces. We felt like getting more parking spaces to the north overall would be a lot better, especially in the summer with the new splash pad opening. In the winter, it'll be a little difficult with junior jazz, but we'll have to just encourage people to, you know, use the other parking areas and maybe even City Hall on the really busy nights. And this is temporary. They hope to be done in less than a year. So on your second point, a question I would have for Paul is, if we do have an emergency, I'm thinking that maybe we always have the right, regardless of an agreement, to maybe open something up to get emergency vehicles through or whatnot.
Certainly if we're responding to a call like an injured construction worker or a crime occurring there, we'd be able to go in there just with our police powers. I guess I'm wondering what kind of, hopefully the emergency isn't junior jazz is really filling up our lot and we want to use those slots.
No, I was thinking more along the lines of what happens if natural disaster or we have a construction emergency or, we have some kind of instant response type thing. Other than like a first responder, I get that. That has rights all the time. I'm just thinking more along the lines, if we had to rebuild because of some kind of disaster or something, and they said, well, we need the space too, we're going to have to compromise at that point.
So what I would say in a situation like that is, you know, I think we can appeal to the county commission and the priorities of municipal services over a library service, I think, would win the day in an emergency. And I think that I think we'd be fine. But if
you can't just take that word out.
I think they want the word exclusive because they want to have the ability to protect their property, because they're gonna have material there that can be stolen.
But if we let them put up a fence, doesn't that take care of that? I mean, all I'm trying to do is protect the what if after. And I don't want to beat this to death, but I think that overall, I'm okay if they put up a fence and they control everything in it so long as nothing changes. But in the event that something crazy happens, I don't want them to say, hey, this is our zone, stay out.
Perhaps a separate section could be added that says, you know, notwithstanding such and such section, if there is an emergency that the city has to use the property, we have the right to do so.
We can't just drop that word.
That word is a really important word. They wouldn't want us to drop it, and I think that we should.
It's a really.
It protects us as well. I mean, really, it's a protection for everyone because it makes it clear who's in control. So if we were to add anything, I'd say add a subsection that just says, you know, notwithstanding the provisions of this section, and if there's you know, we can enter the staging areas or use them in case of you know, major emergencies or something where there was a declaration of emergency declared by the mayor, something to that extent.
Okay, so I'm going to extend that and say that when we talk about exclusivity on that entire staging area, which is the lot to our east, that's a pretty big lot that we have from time to time used a small section of or a portion of, depending on other things that we do. That's, again, one of those that I think exclusivity could be a concern. What if we need some resource over there?
My concern here would be, I think the exposure from a liability standpoint, I think we want to try to limit the city's liability during this construction period of time. I like the term exclusive in there. I think it says, county, you're responsible, not city, even though the land is leased.
I think it's pretty standard in a contract of this sort, so I'm comfortable with it. It really is. I mean, if you talk.
Can you write contracts like that?
No, but my father was a general contractor, so this is pretty normal for them in a construction zone.
Well, I've given my point. I don't like it, but it's my experience that they will take advantage of any clause like that.
Guys, how do you feel?
I don't have a concern with the word. I appreciate Dave bringing up
Sure, yeah.
the issue, because emergencies, you got to be prepared for them. But I guess I have a trust that if there was that big of an emergency, we're going to work with the county to do what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, like you say, Mayor, it protects liability from us.
I'd like to encourage us to follow legal counsel. We've been counseled that is a word that's important to the city. I would like to encourage us to follow that counsel.
So do we want to add the
Call a
clause, or are we good as is?
If you want to add the clause, I'm okay with that too. I'd be fine with that if that makes you feel more comfortable.
Yeah, I don't support it as is.
What's that?
I won't support it as is, but you all can. That's fine.
Well, we're asking if you would like a little wordsmithing, and we can table this until later in the agenda, and pass it with the little clause in there for emergency situations.
Well, I would encourage, I would encourage action tonight. They are getting started.
I personally, I'd like to authorize the administration to execute the interlocal agreement with Davis County Library for temporary use of facilities, with the clause that in the event of emergency that we would have access.
Have a second?
I'll second that.
Any more discussion?
I will go along with your added clause.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Stands unanimous with the amendment. Thank you. Okay, we're at item number 15. And we're glad you're here. We're glad you're here. I've asked Paul if he would go through the mechanics of this evening so that we all understand those mechanics. And here in an hour or two, we're going to add one of you to this bench. We're grateful for your willingness to come. Council, I would note that the individual number C and individual number D have withdrawn. So if you would scratch those from your agenda. Paul, would you lead us through a discussion?
Certainly. So tonight, these procedures are going to be unfamiliar to many of you. There's a combination of governing ordinances and statutes that apply here. First, there's a state code, which is kind of general. They give us some deadlines and some noticing requirements. And then there's our city code, which we've adopted recently to try and make these kind of appointments go a little more smoothly so that people understand what's going on. First, under state law, we were required, of course, to give notice. You noticed those notices and submitted your applications. Those had to be received by December 5th in this case, and we are required by state law to have this vacancy filled by December 19th because that's 30 days since Councilwoman Anderson resigned. Part of our ordinance also includes the questions that were submitted. So if you're wondering why you got those questions, that's why the ordinance asks us to do it. The reason for that is the council would like to have more than just 5 minutes to assess whether they think that you're a good candidate or not. They wanted to get as much information as possible. But at the same time, our time here is limited. We can't delve into an hour-long discussion with each candidate. So that leads us to the first round of interviews. So what will happen here? You'll be called up one at a time. You'll be given 5 minutes. These 5 minutes are very strictly enforced. And you'll get an opportunity to introduce yourselves. And if you want to go over what you submitted in writing, or if you have any clarification for that, please present that to the council. At the end of the initial interview time, the council can have some discussion. At that point, they engage in a round of voting, which eliminates approximately 2/3. Now, with 10 candidates, that means that 4 will advance to the second round. So 6 will be eliminated. Each council member is given 3 ballots. Their names are on those ballots, so we will ultimately know who voted for whom. They write their votes on those ballots. They're not required to vote all 3 times. They're only allowed to vote for a candidate 1 time. But they can vote up to 3 people, so they can pick their top 3. At that point, the mayor will gather those ballots up. The mayor does not vote at this point. He only votes in cases of ties. So at this point, he gathers the ballots, and then we'll tally them up, and then the results will be read here, including both the votes for the candidates and also which council member voted for that person. At that point, we eliminate the 2/3, so 6 people will be eliminated. If someone gets 0 votes, then they're eliminated automatically. So if you say you had 3 candidates that got votes and the other 7 didn't, then only the 3 would advance. If there are any ties, so we end up with a top 3 and then a 4 and a 5 that have an equal number of votes, then there's going to be a runoff to decide who is going to proceed to the next round. The second round is a little less scripted and a little less preparation on your part as applicants. Questions will be asked by the council. These are not things that they've decided beforehand or counseled with each other. These are their own thoughts, their own questions that they have for you. It might be based on something that you've said in your questions or in your introduction, or it could just be a general question they have for you. That will be 10 minutes per candidate. At the conclusion of that, then there's discussion again. And then at the conclusion of the discussion, one council member will make a motion to appoint one of those 4 people. If that's seconded, then they'll have a vote on it. In cases of a tie, the mayor breaks the tie, either voting in favor of it or against it. At the conclusion of the second vote, after a motion is successful and someone has been voted to be appointed, then they'll be sworn in and they get to immediately come up and sit down and join the council. Any questions from the council on procedures or anything like that?
Council, do you have any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, let's begin. Let's begin alphabetically by last name. Does that sound fine?
Wait a minute, I do have one thing, because this came up before. Supposing that we, when we narrow it down after the first round, let's just assume that there is a tie for who that fourth member is. Didn't we set a policy that we would only take the ones that had multiple votes, or?
So if it's a tie for
the fourth place candidate in the first round.
So yeah, in the ordinance, there's a runoff. So those two, you would have the council vote for who they would like to have advance.
Just those two.
Just those two. And if there's a tie, then the mayor would break
And
the
if
tie.
it's 5 people all got 1 vote, then what?
Then you would each get 1 vote. We haven't gone down that road. If we need to.
We kind of had that situation once before, and I thought that we resolved that we just wouldn't go with the extra candidate, but maybe we didn't.
I don't recall that we ever came to resolution on that one, but let's see what happens tonight.
Ms. Bingham, and we're going to hold you to 5 minutes. Cassie, would you be our timer?
I'll begin. As a young girl, I used to look at cheerleaders and officers and see their sweater and think, I want that. And then one day I got that, and I realized that there were 5 o'clock a.m. assembly practices, and there were homecoming balloons to be blown up, and the enormous machine behind what the facade was where all the worker bees were. And that was where I began my worker bee career. When I was just over 20 years old, I was asked to chair the Syracuse Heritage Days Parade. And that is a thankless, payless job. And from there, I was asked to be PTA president, another thankless, payless job. After that, I was a homemaker and a mother, and we can all agree those are usually thankless, payless jobs. But what I found out is I wasn't expecting a raise for this. I was just doing it because that's how you make things go. And volunteerism is how you make things go. In a community, you're vested when you volunteer, and when you volunteer, you're vested in your community. I've served as community council board member several years at Clearfield High School, 1 term as vice chair and 1 term as chair, and one of our main positions and responsibilities was to take the school lands trust money and allocate it. You'd receive a lump sum from the state, and then you were to fund whatever projects you found you were in need of in your school. We had things from CPR dummies to tubas to computer labs to a multitude of very important and really things that should have been prioritized, but they couldn't all be. There's no such thing as enough money. There is a finite amount of money and an eternal amount of projects that need to be funded. And what I learned from that is how to prioritize. Even when I wanted to give the money to everything I could have, I wasn't able to. I also learned that communication is imperative. We were a liaison between the students and the faculty and staff, as well as the community and the parents. And we needed to let everyone know that attended Clearfield High and their children to know what was going on and what was important to us, and to allow them to have a say in what was happening. I was also the alumni president of Clearfield High School, and this was a pet project of a girl who wanted a scholarship. And the moment she received it, she walked away, handing the screaming, neglected, urine-soaked baby to other people to raise, and that would be the volunteers. And what I learned from that is, first, you need to know your community. You need to know that Clearfield High is not Davis High, and you cannot expect the same things. We are a diverse, bordered differently. We're a diverse group of people and community members, and we also don't have generational support, so the expectations needed to be altered according to what the school was. You also need to start with a beginning and an end in mind. If you can't be an idea man and see it through to fruition, then you have no business just being an idea man and walking away. Also, funding matters. If you can't sustain and maintain something 10 years from now, then you have no business starting it to begin with if you can't see it through to the end and know where that money and funding will come from. I've been a state and county delegate for many decades, in fact, and I know that if you want to make a difference, you connect yourself to the people and the positions and the worker bees on the local level. I've been vice chair of Davis County Republican Women twice, vice chair of Utah Federation of Republican Women, vice chair of Davis County Republican Party. I've been completely in charge of things from Lincoln Day dinners to conventions to meet the candidates to luncheons at the governor's mansion. What I've learned from all of that is how to make things go, what it takes to go from the beginning to the end and to bring things to fruition. I've been in church leadership as well as homemaking and raising children for almost all of my life. Too many things to mention about what I learned in those capacities, but they have informed every decision I have made my entire life. We are small business owners, my husband and I. We own an automotive business in Clinton. We originally would have liked to have been here in Syracuse, but the master plan didn't allow it at the time. One thing that I've noticed is things can always be done better, and they don't need to be the way they've always been done. As a mother, I realized that the children and mothers are the ones waiting for those cars to be finished up. We needed a decent waiting room to do so, and that was something that we changed and implemented in our business to do things better than they'd been done before. In conclusion, this is a humbling thing to be a jeweler rolling out a velvet pouch, to have you look at what I have to offer and hope that there's some value there. But I have practical application as the basis for all that I've done in my life, and I hope that you consider this valuable. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bingham. We appreciate your comments. Mr. Colvin.
Just glad I made it this far. I'm actually really glad to be here. I saw the vacancy posted, and I said to myself, what can I do? What skills do I have, or what am I able to do here, or how can I contribute? And so I started thinking, well, what is it that the council needs, or what would they need in a council member? And I thought about what I do for a living. I'm an accountant by trade. And I've always found that the hardest thing for me in the beginning, and the hardest thing for most people to understand, are what are our finances, or how do we get to the point where, the common citizen will understand what's going on with our city, our budget, and in what position we stand in. I started out, I didn't start out as an accountant. I started out as a sales rep, and I slowly turned to accounting, and I was able to go and get experience through auditing, and I worked for Deloitte, and I spent a lot of good time understanding how businesses work. But one of the things I did understand is that there's more to it than just understanding how someone else does their job, but how we can each essentially do or understand how the finances work in a city. I'm currently employed with Ogden City in the controller's office, and it's been a very eye-opening experience. It's my first time actually doing government accounting, but I've noticed that there's so many rules and so many things that we can do, and a fiscal responsibility to the citizens of our city. And so what I would like to do, or I guess what I'd like to do with my experience, is be able to share that. And I saw this as a very good opportunity to do so. I thought, well, what are our challenges right now? And I thought that, Syracuse is growing and constantly growing, and we have infrastructure issues or challenges. We have, how are we going to fund those infrastructures projects, and then how are we going to manage that? And so I thought to myself, if I could be of any use to the council to help understand, or to be a contributor in that sense, I thought it would help. I'm also pretty sociable. I work well in teams, but I really do enjoy people and helping people. I've had the opportunity to help people throughout my life, and there's nothing like it. There's no better joy that I've seen doing that. And so I'm also very punctual. I'd like to end this, but I thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for your thoughts. Council, Mr. Hall is online, and we need to take a minute to set that up. He's Skyping us. He's out of town. Is that still going to take place here at the okay. So we'll take just a second while we set that up so that he can address you. And as I understand, Cassie, correct me if I'm wrong, that he's going to be projected here. Mr. Hall, can you hear me? He's not on yet. Okay. When I was a boy, I always wanted a Dick Tracy watch. I have one. Mr. Hall, can you hear me?
I can. Can you guys hear me?
Good, good. Welcome. We're glad to have you here tonight, and we'll just turn the next 5 minutes over to you. We will have a timer here, and I don't know if he has access to that. I'll try to give you maybe a 30-second warning.
I can see it on the YouTube feed, so I'm good there.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Time is yours.
So first of all, thank you for allowing the accommodation. The timing with travel was a bit challenging, but I appreciate you and Cassie and the team for helping make this happen technically. I've lived in Syracuse for the last 16 years. My wife and I, we have 4 children. I have a daughter and a son who are both at the high school, junior and a sophomore. I have a junior high student, and then I have a third grader at the Syracuse Arts Academy where my wife teaches. We've been involved in the community for quite some time, starting particularly with the Arts Academy. Was heavily involved in that aspect as a financial advisor to the executive board of the original campus on Antelope, and then have continued to be involved through that campus as well as the satellite campus off of 193. As many of you know, I'm also deeply involved with lacrosse in the community. Over the last 7 years, I've served as a coach, a board director for our youth club, as well as a director and state commissioner on the high school state level. So a lot of involvement there. I was, surprisingly enough, one of the things I've been doing the longest was somehow missed on the resume. I've spent the last 14 years up until this last election cycle as the precinct chair for the Republican Party in the Syracuse 01 precinct, which was a great experience, great chance to get to know many community members and neighbors, as well as really help share the importance of the political process, particularly the caucus system and the way that works. I feel pretty passionately about that and the ability to represent as an individual those needs that are most important to our community. And I've always appreciated those who volunteered as those who really understood the need to represent the voice of the whole community, not just themselves. So that's always been a great experience for me. I've spent 16 years with Zions Bank and just recently moved to a new company that actually provides software to financial institutions. And this is relevant in the sense that through that time with Zions, as well as the time with my current company, the opportunity that I have is really to help financial institutions and organizations of all sizes identify the opportunities they have to improve. And that's a big passion for me, and understanding, the key is to know where are we at, where are we headed, and then fill in the gaps and set the plan to execute and make it happen. And that's one of the things that I get the most pleasure out of. And that probably to the chagrin of my children shows up in my home as well. So they often come to me with challenges, and I don't empathize. I empathize, but I don't sympathize with them in the sense that I let them make excuses. We just identify what's the challenge, how do you want it to be, and how are we going to get there. So that's an important, and in my mind, a pragmatic approach. I think that it helps take the emotion out of situations wherever possible. It allows us to make meaningful and well thought out decisions. So that's really, in a nutshell, that's what I wanted to share with you. You've got obviously quite a bit of information in my resume and the questions that I've answered, so I appreciate the opportunity. And if I get a vote, I'll put it to Lisa. Lisa did a great job there. I just want to recognize her for her the time that she took this afternoon as well.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Appreciate that. Mr. Hammond. let's take time to
Reset.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I just want to say I appreciate you taking the time to go over all of us candidates and you being here today and putting the thought in the process that you have here today. I just wanted to go over a couple of things and then kind of explain to you why I wanted to do this and why I'm interested in serving in this position today. I attached 2 documents to my resume packet that are probably a little different, might not be something that you're familiar with or that. The first is a copy of some of my performance excerpts. Those are word for word statements that were included in my performance evaluations over the years. And that was basically so that you could get a better idea of the type of work character that I have and the type of employee that I've been and kind of what my work ethic is. The second thing that I included in there was a 360 survey. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but basically what it is it's a survey that takes place within an organization that includes everyone from the bottom to the top, and everybody evaluates each supervisor, and they evaluate them on a number of things. So as I looked at that, they seemed like they were pretty relevant to the role of a city councilman. When you look at that survey, you see that it talks about competency, public image, work ethic, carrying out the mission statement of the department, concern for community, leadership, welfare of citizens, and commitment for making a better organization. Now, when they did this survey, I'll admit I was a little bit taken back, and I thought, God, where am I going to rate in this? I was a little unsure. I'm used to being evaluated by a supervisor of that, but I wasn't real sure about being evaluated by everybody or how that would shake out. So 5 is a competent supervisor, or 10 is exemplary. When I got the results of the survey back, it honestly was kind of humbling in the fact that I realized to see that I scored in between an 8.75 and a 9.5 in each category. And as I looked at that, it really was a point in time where I started to reflect on a lot of the leadership characteristics that I have and the talents and abilities that I have, and also the things that I can bring to this position. And as you may well know, I did serve on the Planning Commission for 2 years back in 2002 and 3, and then I served for 4 years on the City Council from 2004 to 2007. That was a pretty interesting time in Syracuse City's history. And as I look back on that, when I left that office, there were some things about that I took a great deal of pride and enjoyment in and successes I had, and there were a few things that I look back on that I wish I had a do-over on, that I thought I could have made a little better decision and maybe had a little bit of a better chance to impact the future. One of my things that I enjoyed a lot in doing is I coached competition baseball, and I've coached my older son, I coached my younger son. In coaching youth sports, it's a fun and frustrating experience all in the same thing. And one of the things that along the way, it started out as a saying I saw on Facebook or on a meme somewhere, and it was, we never lose, we either win or learn. And the more challenges that came up over my life, the more I started to incorporate that philosophy and that concept into how I am, what the type of character that I've grown to be, the leadership abilities I have. And as the last election cycle came around, I really started getting that itch and that desire to get back into local government. I've grown up in this community my whole life. I love this city. The time that I spent working with the city, I really was endeared to a lot of the people that were here, a lot of the staff and the community, and I enjoyed it. And as I looked at it, I thought, should I run, should I not? I looked back on and I let the negatives, I let the losses, the things that I had, the missed opportunities, I guess, choose my decision. So as I watched this one come around and it opened up, I really did a lot of introspection. And I thought, okay, I'm in this spot. What is it that's brought me to this spot? What is it that allows 30 people that I work with to give me such high and flattering scores in a survey like that on leadership and affecting the community? And what I realized is it boils back to my statement there. We never lose, we either win or learn. The greatest lessons that I've learned at this stage in my life didn't come from the successes that I had. They came from the times that I lost, the mistakes that I made, the missed opportunities, because it allowed me to grow and evolve. I look back on the things that I did right, and a lot of them I can hardly remember, but I know though it worked out good in the end. But in the end, the reason why I'm here today is because of the the opportunity to bring back the lessons that I've learned from the times that I didn't win. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Hammond. Ms. Hicks.
This is a little like the Hunger Games.
Yes.
Name up there, timer, being judged.
Glad you noticed.
It's a little nobody dies at the end, right? So I kind of just wanted to talk a little bit more about myself and kind of my journey and why I wanted to join you guys at the table. I've always been acutely aware of my community around me, and that's not even necessarily the city that I was brought up in. I've lived in Bountiful, I've lived in Kaysville, I've lived in Provo, I've lived in Layton, and now I've chosen to live in Syracuse. Now that I'm an adult, I'm big now, so I came to Syracuse. It very early on started when I was 6 years old. I was in a single parent household, and my mom registered me in the Big Brothers Big Sisters program, and I had a big sister. Still know and love her today. I had her till I was 18 years old. She sent around, and we did a lot of community services around the McDonald House. Sorry, I hate speaking in front of people. Ronald McDonald House, kind of those types of things. We had a lady in our neighborhood that it was Spaghetti Thursdays. She would bring spaghetti dinner and garlic bread to our house every Thursdays while my mom was going through school and kind of setting us up for success. I had church leaders, my CTRB teacher, Charlie, who I named my child after, just kind of took in that father role and was amazing. In high school, which is everybody knows is everyone's funnest time, Skills USA VICA, Vocational Industrial Clubs of America, I got a chance to go back to DC and run as the state secretary, and I won that honor, but it was my community that rallied around me that paid for my ability to go back there and kind of see all those fun things. At 19 years old, I worked at, it wasn't called Safe Harbor then, it's called Safe Harbor now, and they were transitioning into a rape recovery center, and you can only imagine as a 19-year-old kind of being volunteered at a rape recovery center and a domestic violence center. You saw a lot of hard things, and then for some weird reason, I wanted to work in government, and my first job was at the Salt Lake County Jail, where you got to see more hard things and you got to see the other side of it. I met my favorite husband, who's in the back. I say favorite. I'm your favorite too, right? Yeah. Where I met him, and we kind of, he's been working up there a lot longer than I have. But I got into government work because it was probably the easiest way that I knew to make a difference. At the Salt Lake County Jail, you can't really make much of a difference, so it was nice to kind of move on and go from there. I worked at the health department, if anybody remembers H1N1, and the fun time that was. I was really instrumental in I managed the phone calls. It's called it's at the EOC Center, at the EOC, where we managed all the phone calls that were coming in, people wanting vaccine, and we had to make, hard conversations with these people that not everybody was going to get a vaccine. Pregnant women, the elderly, and children were the first ones to get them, and those are hard conversations to have with people. And I trained those people, the people who were answering the phones with those conversations. I also scheduled for the whole entire health department to make sure everybody was at the right clinic and made sure that ran smoothly. Currently, I work in the mayor's office for Salt Lake County, who's going through we're going through a little transition with the mayor being elected to Congress. And so we're kind of doing something similar, although the employees don't get to vote who the new mayor is. That would have been nice, but so my government service has always been, or my community service has always been kind of at that very beginning. I've always kind of wanted to help. I've always wanted to learn. I've always wanted to listen. I'm really well versed in talking to angry people, and I'm really well versed in talking to nice, lovely people as well. And just an honor to stand here and talk with you guys and be considered. So thanks.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Mr. Ormsby.
I'm going to be terribly brief because you've seen my resume and my application, and I was under the impression that you might want to ask a question or two, so if you want to, that's fine, but just a couple of statements. I know that I'm not likely to be chosen for my youth or good looks. That's okay. I chose to apply on my fondness for Syracuse and for helping out as best I can. If I can make a dent in the community and help out, I would like to do that. Syracuse holds a special place in my heart, and I think it has great potential for continued responsible development and a continued great quality of life, which I think is probably the first and most important consideration for the citizens of Syracuse. As far as what I can offer, I think my experience on my resume speaks favorably, and I believe my desire to serve rounds that out. I can listen, I can analyze, I can be decisive on important issues. I respectfully suggest that my experience on a city council, on a planning commission, on a board of adjustments, on a special counsel for the Hill Air Force Base on hazardous materials, will allow me to not just join you, but to hit the road running, which I hope is appealing to you. And I do welcome your questions and hope that my presentation has been satisfactory.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Teague.
I have Schultz.
Oh, yeah. You can come right after him.
I was hoping Mr. Ormsby would be longer than that. So, a little bit about me. I think my greatest weakness here is just obviously my time being in Syracuse. I just moved here probably a year and a half ago. A little bit about my background. I'm from Milford, Utah. I don't know if you guys know where that's at. Small town, worked on a farm. So I've lived up here I've moved up here in 1991, kind of just looking for that small town value and everywhere, just all around. I lived in Weber County pretty much till I moved here in Syracuse. I got hired on as a police officer in South Ogden, been there since 1994, been in law enforcement for a long time. I guess I'll get to the point to where I decided to move to Syracuse. My wife and I was looking, we could move anywhere we wanted. We wanted to choose a good location to raise our kids, a good area around, close to her work, my commute a little bit closer too, so I can respond in case of emergency. Out of taking out all the cities that we looked at, she's familiar with Davis County, Kaysville area. We looked at Syracuse, and it hit every requirement that we wanted. So we moved all but the taxes, I think, was kind of, we're like, holy cow, them taxes are high. But having that in mind, we decided to move to Syracuse, and right as soon as moving into the community, man, everybody's waving to us in the neighborhood. Friendly. I mean, they've welcomed us, the whole time we've been here. Got to know a lot of good friends in that short amount of time. Been part of all the community. I've since got elected as on the community council for Bluff Ridge, and I've been doing that right after I moved here, and which I enjoyed. I know it sounds like some other people's been involved in that as well, so you know what that does. I've also been in law enforcement. I've had opportunity to help a lot of people. I sit on the New Sane board, which represents Davis County, Weber, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with what the New Sane board is, but it's a place for sexual assault victims to go and have some privacy. And, so I've been sitting on that board for about a year and a half. I think the strengths that I bring to the council has a lot to do with my career. Probably the spot that I'm known for in Weber County and that I want to bring here to Syracuse is being able to look at you guys. I came to the earlier session, the work session, to kind of watch everybody and see how you guys work together and try to be able to combine everybody to work as a team. Who had input. I listened to some of the questions and then kind of how everything took place here. And I was very impressed because there's a lot more to the city council than what I think a lot of people recognize. So I commend you guys for putting in the hard work. I looked at the pay that you guys make as far as doing the city council too. It's, you know, I mean, I know it's a lot more than just these meetings. I know you set in mosquito abatements. I know you know, I mean, there's just several different boards that you guys set and put a lot of time in. So, you know, I mean, it's a good public service that you guys do, and I do appreciate it. You know, I mean, I think that I just want to be part of your team and help make decisions. I know that Syracuse has a lot of, and just listening to you, a lot of future planning, rezonings, and I just want to be part of it. There's really no other reason other than, you know what, I like this community, I love this community, and I'm going to be vested in it no matter what happens tonight, or, you know, I mean, I'll be here for the future, and I don't plan on going anywhere. I've got kids in school, got an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, and like I said, the place we chose is our house forever. And, you know, I mean, the schools that we looked into, trust me being a detective, I look into everything. You know, I evaluate everything, and that's how I make my decision is, you know, I mean, taking information from department heads, people that's been here for a long time, from city managers to just everybody, to take the advice and come up with a good decision. And that's what I look forward to being part of. Think I have anything else?
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. I got a new bifocal, and I can't see the page very well. I'm sorry. Mr. Teague.
Well, I just want to start out by thanking you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for giving me the opportunity to come up here and present a little bit more about myself and talk about why I'm interested in joining your this city council and representing Syracuse and the citizens. I really love this city. We've been here about 2.5 years. We moved here from Layton. We were in Davis County for the last 7 years. And before that, I was in Logan, but I was born and raised in Southern California. I was educated and received my bachelor's degree in political science and German. Political science and German, not in German. And then I came up to Utah to attend graduate school at the University of Utah, where I studied public policy and demographic studies. I had to establish residency here, so I spent a year assisting with opening a restaurant up in Logan, where I learned the ins and outs of private sector business. I should say earlier than that, my father was a general contractor, owned his own business for the entirety of my childhood, and so my Saturdays and every other day after school was spent on his job sites and helping him out for $20 a week or whatever he would give me. But I learned some hard lessons about work, and also during that experience, I learned about interactions with the city and how important it is to have building permits, to have inspectors, and to have those individuals secure and make sure the job sites are prepared and safe for work and for ongoing processes. I started after graduate school with Salt Lake County as a contracted worker, and I took a cubicle in the Human Services Department, and I was wedged between Michelle Hicks here. She was a few spaces behind me at the front desk, and then next to me was this guy named Brigham Mellor, and he's a funny guy to work with. But I took a contract job, kind of trying to help the county understand whether our public defender contract was efficient and whether we had the finance in place to support growing and expanding our public services for that field. That was a 6-month project. From there, I was approached by the Public Works Director to come and look at some policies and some standard operating procedures for Public Works that might help make our public works system a little more efficient as well. During that process, we were able to discover a policy that was put in place that led to, over a 4-year period, about a $4.5 million shortfall because of an oversight in the way we were measuring garbage consumption and drop off at our landfill. That was a really contentious issue that led to a lot of citizen concern and complaint. Luckily, my public works director got to field some of that feedback, which I think you guys are accustomed to when people come at you with some concerns and some public issues. But from that point, I understood how important it was to have good public policy. You guys are tasked with that for this city. You guys are tasked with making tough decisions that are not always popular. Truth and taxation time is a fun time, I think, for you guys. You guys are tasked with telling people no when there's not enough resources, when they come to you with a need that for them is the most pressing and important thing in their world. And you guys are also in charge of saying yes when something is so pressing that it's going to put some people at odds. And I really value that. I think that that is a skill set that I have, is to use logic and to look at data and to be responsive to people and to analyze situations as they arise. I'm really good at bringing individuals together, stakeholders. That's what I do currently as my position as a program manager for Salt Lake County Behavioral Health. It's the largest department, or division, in Salt Lake County with a $113 million budget. I manage all the grants for there, and I manage as well the transparency and reporting back to the state legislature to ensure that we're using these dollars wisely. That's a big task, but I'm excited to do it, and I'm excited to work with you guys if I have the opportunity to move forward in this process, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. D. Mr. Thorson.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for your time. I'll start out by saying most of you know me, you've met me. I've worked in the city on the Planning Commission for several years. This past year as the chairman, prior to that as the vice chairman. This past year I've also served on the Board of Adjustments, the newly organized Board of Adjustments. Prior to that, I lived in Idaho, where I served on the Planning and Zoning Commission in Bingham County. It's just something I love to do. I love to be involved in my community. I get excited about how it works. If you've heard minutes or heard my comments, I just really like the way things go and how decisions get made, consensuses get built, compromises get chosen. It makes me smile. It gets me giddy. I love doing that. I feel that the love for your community is revealed in how you get involved and your efforts to get involved. You probably already know I'm an engineer by career. As an engineer, I've been involved in projects from development, municipal, state, federal, of all types, infrastructure, planning, construction, where the projects have required that I get involved in how it works, the planning, the budget, the quality control of those projects, the inspection, and even the closeout, and the importance of each of those parts for a successful project. Other parts of my career have broadened out my horizons, where I worked in a group home working with mentally ill persons. I worked in construction for a while, and I still love doing construction for neighbors and family who ask. But I moved my family here to Syracuse several years ago as a conscious choice. My children are all young. In 3 years, I will send 5 kids to elementary school at a time. It will be quite an adventure. But their future is my future here. That's what I chose and what I plan to do, and I plan to be involved in that. Because you know me, I hope that that gives you a good understanding of the type of person I am, my ideas, my opinions, and my attitudes. I'm pretty conservative, but I'm pretty pragmatic. As decisions get made, I'm very aware of course, my opinion, but also what the code, what the ordinances, what the city planning documents say. But aside from that, I'll give you a couple pieces of advice that I live my life by. They come from my dad. I'll keep the ones I got from the football coach, I'll keep to myself. But when I turned 18 and was graduating from high school, my dad started to reflect on what his life was and the decisions he made. He says, Grant, I'm not perfect. There's a lot of honorable things that you can do in your life. He says you can go on a church mission, you can go into the military, you can go get a job, you can go to college. And I said, I know, Dad, I'm trying to make plans. And he says, but you got to go. He didn't want me to stay home and do nothing. He wanted me to go do stuff. He wanted me to figure out a path in life that was honorable and successful. Another piece of advice I got from him, during college, I'd often go to lunch and make him buy me lunch. As part of that, I got married and had to go through some of the struggles with starting up, how you start a family. And in a conversation about insurance and rent, he says, Grant, it's a good time. You're trying to be your own man. You got to be your own man, he says. So that's what I do in life. I go about trying to do the honorable things, getting involved in my community, being my own man, trying to do the best I can. My wife and I have found success in our home and with our children by remembering that often slow and steady wins the game. The long-term goals are what really matters. I've had success in my career by doing the same, understanding the process and how things work, sometimes being strict, sometimes being flexible. Those are the things that you have to decide. You guys get to decide, and hopefully myself, if I'm chosen to sit on the council. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thorson. Mr. Vaughn.
Mayor, council, staff, and honored guests. My name is Ralph Vaughn. I live in the Canterbury Park area of town. I've driven every street in Syracuse. I have my own personal copy of the general plan. I've read it. I've also read the 118-page budget that you formulated for 2017-2018. I have some observations inside that in which I'll make some comments. I also have 37 years of cumulative service on the municipal level. In addition to those, I have several years on the county, regional, and state level, again, dealing with municipal issues. There are three main parts of being a city councilman. The first one is professional staffing, making sure that you have a professional staff that's running your city. I currently believe in your current city manager. I think he's doing an outstanding job. I know all of your major department heads. They all know me. I don't know all of the other 84 members of your excellent staff, and I'll tell you why I think they're excellent. In the budget, I believe I have attended more city council meetings than all of the other candidates combined over the past 5 years. There are many times I was the only person in the room. You know this because I was the only other person in the room other than staff. Syracuse is a capital asset corporation with approximately $139 million in your capital asset. It's governed by a usually a six-member board of directors. It is responsible to a group of customers, exactly 9,167 of those customers, which are actually parcel holders. They share in a $2.4 billion market value asset, which is what Syracuse is. That's up almost $1 billion in market value share in the last 8 years. Syracuse is growing, it's booming. We're doing an excellent job. The revenues for the corporation were $36 million, with expenses of $22 million, which means you made a $14 million profit. With that $14 million, if we were to spend it the way we wanted to, we could buy the park, we could finish the park, we could pave all of the roads that Mr. Whiteley would love to see paved. We would also be able to do a number of other things. Mr. Whiteley would be happy if we bought those $2 million water tanks that we desperately need to bring our city into the next decade. Unfortunately, Steve Marshall won't allow you to go and spend your money pell-mell the way you want. That's his job, and he's good at it. We could also use $9.1 million of that to pay off your NBA loan. But on the other hand, the decision that you made 2 years ago to refinance it down is going to save the city $700,000 over the term of that. On another front, city sales tax was up 9.6%, bringing in $300,000 of additional revenue. But on a downside, Your $3 million sewer budget failed by $110,000 last year. Hopefully we'll do better this year and in the future year. The consolidated fee schedule that we talked about tonight, I think will be an outstanding benefit to the city. Our developers have added capital assets, $4.4 million through the projects that have been added to the city. The RDA has its 4 projects, one of which, the Antelope CDA, is going to be dramatically impacted by the new project called Nodes. One of them is going to be completely wiping out. One of the interesting things I found out about the city is that unfortunately there's only 2 of our local businesses in the top 10 employers that are actually located in the city. One is Smith's, the other is Walmart. But the most important thing I would like to convey to you is this one simple statement. I aspire to serve as admirably as Andrea Anderson did. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughn. Wow, council. How would you like to proceed, council?
Well, I think it's just absolutely unfair because there's good candidates and at least 9 of you are going to leave unhappy. And for that, I'm sorry, but yeah, this is crazy.
Well, I'll make some general comments that won't help anything because this is difficult. But when I sat down and I wrote notes, here's what I'm going to look for as I go through things that you sent in and as I hear what you say. I want somebody that has some sort of experience and knowledge to hit the ground running. That when I look for that, I'm going to look for somebody who's served on a board or a council or a planning commission or a school community council, or who has run for office, which I think is very important to me. I want to look for somebody who has budget knowledge or experience, or planning experience. I want to look for somebody who has a unique perspective on Syracuse, whether they've lived here for a long time or not, or they haven't lived here very long. And then I want to look for somebody who fits in with the current council and maybe steps into some of the great things that Andrea Anderson was doing. So basically with all that, I haven't whittled it down from 10 to anything. There's still 10 great candidates who fit some portion of that. And then it's tough because I personally know and like about half of you. So I like all of you, but I personally know about half of you. I should have stated that.
They won't like you when we're done.
So I'm just going to state that I think voting for people is much more difficult than voting for issues. This is crazy.
I just have to say I'm humbled at all of you coming forward to do this, and especially on a repeat, and even if not, daring to do it. So thank you for your willingness to serve and for willingness to expose yourself to judgment. It's not easy, so thank you.
Jordan? Cassie, do you have a ballot? Yeah.
So all of these ballots, some of them are for the future. We just do one. Okay.
And when you're finished, council, if you'll turn it over, I get to be the runner.
I hate this part. Yeah. I know.
Been there, done that. No fun.
I might mention that all of the schools that serve Syracuse, I have the opportunity to meet once a year, and they come to lunch. It's kid food that we eat, and as part of that, we have an election process, and one of them is elected mayor. And then that mayor appoints 5 city council persons, an attorney, a recorder, and a city manager, and then we give them a problem to solve in here. They sit at the dais here, and it is so fun to watch them solve that problem and the election that went on.
Thanks to the state legislature, all of this is very public.
One of the requirements of the state statute is you will also know the tally of the vote and who voted in what direction. That will become part of the public record. And it is really hard from this position. Really hard.
Lots of good jokes.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and read the votes from those ballots, and then we are going to need to do a runoff, but we'll announce how these 4 ballots were voted first. Councilmember Peterson voted for Lisa Bingham, Seth Teague, and Danny Hammond. Councilmember Savage voted for Lisa Bingham, Seth Teague, and Ralph Vaughn. Councilmember Bolduc voted for Lisa Bingham, David Hall, and Brian Schultz. And Councilmember Mon voted for Lisa Bingham, Mark Colvin, and Grant Thorson. So advancing to the next round will be Lisa and Seth, but we need to do a runoff for Mark, David, Danny, Brian, Grant, and Ralph. So if you'll just use another one of those ballots and just vote for 2 or for 1. For 2.
Say those names again, please.
Yeah, that was.
So Mark Colvin, David Hall, Danny Hammond, Brian Schultz, Grant Thorson, and Ralph Vaughn. So if you'll vote for 2 of those, and we'll see if we can get top 2 out of this ballot. Okay, so we're gonna need another runoff.
At least narrow it down a little.
Okay, Paul screwed up.
For the record. For the record.
For the record.
Thanks for
That's all
that.
right. That's all right.
I just love
Just
tension.
kidding. So we actually don't need another runoff. So we'll go ahead and read those ballots and then announce who's going to go to the next round. So Councilmember Mon voted for Mark Colvin and Grant Thorson. Councilmember Bolduc voted for David Hall and Brian Schultz. Councilmember Savage voted for Danny Hammond and Grant Thorson. And Councilmember Peterson voted for Danny Hammond and Ralph Vaughn. So advancing to the next will be Grant Thorson and Danny Hammond. And you're familiar with the process for those four, or do you need Paul to go over that again to
So we
summarize?
won't need ballots at this point because we'll just.
No, yeah, you'll be done with your ballots.
Okay.
Who all four?
The four
So-
are, let me read them to you in alphabetical order, and then we'll go in reverse of alphabetical order this time. Is that fair, council? And we'll have them come forward, and we'll allow a 10-minute period to ask questions. So it would be Grant Thorson first, Seth Teague second, Danny Hammond third, and Lisa Bingham fourth. Is that correct?
Yep.
In reverse order? Okay. Is that correct? Is that okay? So, Mr. Teague, if you'd like to come forward, we're going to take 10 minutes, and the council may have questions for you.
That's
Anything
gonna-
else that you may want to offer at this time?
Mayor, that's going to be Grant Thorson.
Grant Thorson, you're starting with that.
2 times.
He really likes you, Seth.
He's just excited to get to you, Seth.
I really need a trifocal, and I'm trying not to be that old. Grant, would you come?
This is back and forth, I presume?
Yes, this is a back and forth.
All right.
Yeah, so council, have at him.
Okay. I stated before, I put a lot of stock into somebody who's run for office. In about 5-6 months, you would have to make that decision. Do you have any thoughts about that right now? If is this a one-year appointment, or is it a long-term potential?
This is long-term. I'd made a failed attempt to run for office as a county commissioner when I lived in Idaho. That is what I like to do, is get involved in the community and do what I can to get involved. So yeah, that's the answer. I did run for office as a county commissioner and had a great night like this while we saw results come in.
Grant, you served on the Planning Commission for a while now. Sometimes the Planning Commission puts forth their thoughts and the council has a different perspective. Reflect a little bit on how you see the different roles.
The council has a little more leeway, I believe, and they have different accountability. And so the differences in decisions or outcomes isn't really a surprise to me. We all have different opinions, but as the Planning Commission and working as an administrative group, sometimes a legislative group, to provide recommendations, we do look at the code a lot more, hopefully as a first pass for you guys to then rely on to make your decisions. And so when I look at that, when I look at outcomes the City Planning Commission has had versus the City Council, I recognize just that, different accountabilities and somewhat different responsibilities. Where and in addition to that, there's different circumstances of information. the city council operates under. They get public input different, more openly. They get closed door information, of course, more often. And so as the Planning Commission, we do our best to interpret the code, come up with different conditions or different influences we can have on what happens and what gets recommended. But it's not always going to be the same. It shouldn't be the same, but it is. We make our recommendation. You guys look at it.
Okay,
Go ahead.
no, you're all right, if you want to. Fine, all right. Mr. Thorson, what is your opinion on development in the city, particularly with residential development? Tell us your thoughts on that.
Residential development going into the future, we have an existing city general plan, and I've made it openly known. I don't think higher density is allowed in that general plan, or at least it's not part of what the city foresaw when that general plan was written. We have opportunity to make a new general plan, and that may include it based on public input. I would be open to that. My response in decision making is hopefully to take into account what the public has said. And that general plan came about by quite a bit of public input, and I have to respect that. I think the city is going to have to respond to a market that exists, whether the market is driven by supply or supply has to respond to what the market, or whether demand is there for the product they produce, or whether the market just gives them what they want to give them, whether it's high density or not. There's a balance there. The city will come up with that and find that balance, but the current city plan, I don't think allows for high density. It allows for some tweaking, and so that's what my opinions in the past have been based on. My personal opinion is let the people have what they want, what they really want to have. And if that means public input comes back for high density, then I'm welcome to that. I've approved apartments. I've approved all sorts of things as part of planning commissions here and in Idaho. And that's my objection isn't to density. My objection is to overriding what the public input already had been and the governing documents that the planning commission has to operate under.
I'm going to ask kind of a two-part question. So I'll ask both of them and I'll let you think about them, and we're going to see how well you can retain the second question.
I'm going to write it down because I know how well I can retain the second question.
So first of all, and pardon the poor grammar, but what needs fixing in Syracuse? And the second question is, if appointed to council, what will be a few of your priorities?
Okay. Those were questions that came on the written exam. So I guess it's
in one
oral.
form or another.
What needs fixing in Syracuse? I think that we're struggling right now with we have a great build-up to have a great city in response to the growth that we've had over the last 15 years. Not so much fixing, but the biggest struggle the city will have will be whether to continue that. We do have a bit of a level of service that we'll have to continue to build, grow, and respond to what the city needs. In my written response, I think the city has a good balance for what's going on. I think they have a good plan going forward, and my opinion would be try and stick to the plan. I don't respond to drama. Don't respond to carrots or sticks very well. My roller coaster ride is dead flat. I don't like the other parts. I don't like to see the highs and lows. I like to see steady, measured growth, progress, predictable growth, progress. As a priority on the city council would be to make sure that the city is responding to the input the public gets, whether it's in respect to services with respect to development. That's a big one right now. Infrastructure, making sure the city's responding to the public input that comes in and that the people are served well. There's some give and take with respect to what the public knows, how much they know about how the city works, and making decisions behind the scenes that honestly the public doesn't always know all the information. And making sure that that trust is there so that the public trusts the city is operating correctly. When something happens they don't like, they can rely on that trust to go forward and have confidence and to continue to give the city the authority they need to manage the city.
I got one more.
Go ahead.
Okay. This is really open to however you want to answer this. Just speak to your philosophy about parks. What we have, what we need to develop, what place they play in a city.
I'll go back to a little bit of one of the challenges the city has. I think the city has laid out and has some great baseline infrastructure with regards to parks. The struggle will be to update and add amenities to those parks. There's existing parks that are getting crowded and existing parks that are just great big open spaces. And being able to add amenities to those parks, to use impact fees to improve those parks, to add value so that the city citizens can use those parks like they want to use them. And for my experience, I coached soccer over by the fire station. My van got stuck in the mud of the parking lot. And that's a struggle the city will have as they go forward, is to add amenities. The people here love the parks. I love the parks. My kids love the parks. And having parks that the people use, knowing and understanding how they use them, providing those amenities will be a big struggle. I'm for that. Adding amenities to parks, adding amenities to existing parks to make sure they're getting used efficiently.
Anything else? Thank you, Grant. Appreciate it. We're at a time. Seth? By the way, I was going alphabetically by last name.
I don't want to be let down again.
Council?
I'll ask, you can hit both of mine. You ran before, would you run again, or is this a short-term thing? And then speak about parks.
Well, so I wouldn't be here if I wasn't interested in being an asset to the community on a longer term. I ran for office and I won the third alternate for Doug's position. So if you die or on a plane or anything, I think that comes down to me after a few other people. So I'm highly interested in this position. I'm highly interested in being an asset to the community for more than just this term. I think it would be a detriment to take this position and not have some long-term goals in mind. Long-term meaning more than just the rest of this term.
And then talk about parks.
Yeah.
What you feel like we have, what do we need, what should we do as a council going forward?
Yeah, so as a consumer of parks, I think that, so I guess Syracuse for me, when we first moved here, it was the perfect location for us to kind of get away from the hustle and bustle. But then when we got here, you start looking around and you go, well, I've got to go to West Point. I've got to go back into Layton. I've got to do these things. And if I want to recreate, I need to look for the park that has this type of play place for my kids. And I don't want that feeling for Syracuse. So I think that is, to Mr. Thorson's statement there, that's a challenge that we have is allowing people the opportunity to recreate here, to make this their home, to make this their identity. And parks are an important part of that. We recreate, we take our dog out. I do like some of the open space parks because then my dog can just go for miles and no one's there. But I think that the real draw is having as many people as possible enjoy that amenity. And so it would be a huge priority for me.
Seth, you said yourself that you've lived here just about 2.5 years. So tell me how you feel you'd be able to connect well with the feel of Syracuse with maybe a limited experience there.
Sure, yeah, thank you for that question. I would almost challenge, what is that feel for Syracuse? As I ran for office, I had the opportunity to go out and talk with a lot of people, and there's such a diversity of opinion on what Syracuse means for them. There's definitely that older population and generation that wants this to remain a closet community and sleepy and not be disturbed by all the growing trends and having to put in new taxes in place to bring amenities and streets and all the infrastructure projects that come with that. But there's also a growing population of individuals who want this to be a vibrant community with art, with recreation, with opportunities to grow and expand. We have opportunity on the horizon with the West Davis Corridor, and how we're going to capitalize on that opportunity is going to really shape the future of this city as it continues to grow. We know the projections for Davis County. We know where population is projected to grow. And so I think that I have an opportunity to enhance that with my experiences. I think that being part of larger communities that have in the past come from nowhere and grown would serve as an asset for me. And so I think that not necessarily not being here for several years would be a detriment to me. I think that that would be okay. Yeah.
So as a follow-up to that, either way you make a decision on that subject, there's going to be a group that's unhappy. How do you address the other side of both of those groups, for that matter, when they say, if it's the long-term people who say, hey, wait a minute, you're making me like a big city and I never wanted to be that, or your other group that says, hey, I want to, grow and I want all this stuff, but I don't want to be taxed?
Sure. No, that's also a good question. First, step one is I go on Facebook and I look at your responses. I think you do a good job, an admirable attempt to kind of appease some of the differing opinions that come across. But in all seriousness, I mean, it's a real challenge is putting the interests of multiple different groups and trying to appease as many as possible. I think you have to contest that with logic and reason and methodology, real deep analysis, and really just understanding what the concerns are there. You guys are tasked as council members to make those difficult decisions and then to report back to your citizens on why you made those decisions, full transparency. And so I think it's just in the fact that if you've given it a full thought out response and you've done your homework, you've looked at where that answer lies within the city's vision and plan, that's your challenge and your responsibility. But I think that's how you have to proceed with full, thinking through that process.
Mr. Teague, what is your opinion on property rights, both occupied and undeveloped property?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think that, and that's a tough one. I think that here in Syracuse, there's a lot of undeveloped property, and the challenge with growth is that sometimes we have to impinge on some of that, and there's opportunities for us to grow, but in doing that, we're gonna have to make people mad. You're going to have to encroach on some of those rights. I think that with the vast majority of that, we really need to be respectful and responsive to our citizens and listen and incorporate their feedback and their status, I guess, in the community. But then when there's tough decisions to be made, sometimes we do have to encroach on that, and that's going to be where the difficulty lies.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So I'll give you the same two-part, but I'm going to add a third part.
Oh.
The difficulty. So first of all, I'm going to add on to what Corinne said, or her question, and just say, so in the event that there is what we'll call a desire from the city for something to be one thing, and the resident wants their property to be something else, who gets the final say? That's the first question. Then the other two are the same as the ones before. What needs fixing in Syracuse? And if appointed to council, what would be your priorities?
This is more about memory or about answering the question right? Okay, so the first part, I would say that as a professional staff of administrators in the city, we would lean on what code and statute requires us to do, and at the end of the day, the citizen would need to come to terms with that, and I think we'd have to move forward with how the city needs to move forward. Second question was in regards to
what needs fixing in Syracuse.
yeah. So I think you guys do a great job. I think that with growth, there's a lot of challenges that come with that. So I would say maybe not fixing, but enhancing is probably a better way to put it. Over time, services and utilities and infrastructure goes bad. I'm a victim of that. I say victim because I live off of 2000 West. We moved here right when the first houses were being knocked down and became the second house from the end instead of the third house from the end, which is a little unnerving. But that's a necessary evil, I would say. And so that is going to be our biggest challenge kind of moving forward, is keeping pace with all the growth and ensuring that we have the tax base to support that growth sustainable moving forward. I think that we can't simply leverage the future on the backs of new growth. And so it's a real strategic move on your guys' part to plan for that. And then the third question was...
What are your priorities if appointed to the council?
Sorry. My priorities would be to spend time with our administration, get to know the services, the tools that they have to their as assets, and get to know what the planning commission is looking at, what the city planners are looking at, what our citizens want, just really to kind of get to know the atmosphere for the first little bit, because I don't think I can move forward without really fully understanding the landscape, the environment moving forward. And then after that, I'd like to sit down with the economic development team, understand what we've done for recruitment, for vision for the city, and how we're making ourselves more attractive to bring in the sustainable base that the community needs.
Council, are you content?
I'm good.
You good? Okay, thank you, Seth.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Danny?
All right, I'll start with the question of, is this a one-year thing or longer for you?
I'll tell you what, I put a ton of thought into this, especially since through the last election cycle. And this is something I really would like to get back into. And I made the commitment when I put in this and the decision that this is what I'm going to do now, and whether it works out, I'm going to go ahead and run in the next go-around.
Now, I think I know how you feel about Parks and Rec, so I'm going to shift my second question, and I hope I'm not stealing Dave's, because it's kind of the opposite of what he asked Seth, and that is, as a long-term, lifelong resident here, how do you deal with the thoughts of the new generation that's here, and the development that's happening, and maybe potentially more density, and all this that's going on as growth happens?
Well, I think if you look at it from the standpoint of how am I going to make this up from the start to finish, and you don't look at some of the history that's happened in neighboring communities, you basically make the problem 10 times harder. But as you look around and you see, I'll give you a prime example. I work for Roy City. When I started 21 years ago, Roy City made the determination, people in your position, that they were going to be a big bedroom community. Well, the open spaces that they loved that brought people there filled up with houses because property owners have rights, and things filled in, and now they have a large bedroom community with a struggling tax base and tons and tons of problems and challenges to meet the future. So it's not about what this group or that group wants. The goal, in my opinion, would be to set up a foundation that 20 years from now, whoever's in that seat could look at it and go, I am so dang glad that somebody had the foresight to realize that Syracuse City needed a vibrant commercial district to be able to fund the programs that we need to, so that we can have cops and firemen and parks programs and rec programs, and we can have a community center to do the things that we need to. There's some communities around us that have done a phenomenal job at creating a good balance. You look at, I'll throw it out, look at Riverdale. They're completely overloaded on the commercial side, and that overload on commercial has negatively impacted their residential side. But then you look at a city like Kaysville, and you look at Layton, and you see how they have planning took place in those cities to set up a good commercial area that didn't negatively impact the residential community long term. And they're able to meet the needs and challenges, not just 5 years from now, but 10 years and 20 years down the line. If anybody goes into this position and starts playing or pandering to well, the old residents want this or the new people want this, you're going to offend half of the people and you're going to leave a problem for someone else to resolve somewhere down the road. My approach would be to look at a balanced program or growth that incorporates a healthy and vibrant commercial area to fund the ongoing needs of the city well into the future, that doesn't detract from the residential commitment that's in there, because each property owner, whether somebody wants to look out that field and see that view and look at those mountains and look at that lake, they have a right to do something with their property. And we set what that something is. And we can set it as a bunch of houses or some mixture of their end. And so I think it needs a global approach that doesn't look or pander to any particular interest within the city, but looks at a long-term approach of what is this going to do 15 or 20 years down the road. Because 15 or 20 years down the road, somebody's going to be trying to put cops on the street and pay for salaries and pay for fire trucks and all of the other things that a city needs. And so my approach would be not to pay to either side and do what's best in the city for the long-term growth.
Danny, back when you were on the council, it was a kind of a contentious time, as you recall, I'm sure.
It was.
Bless your heart for that. What were some of the ramifications for having to work in a hostile city environment?
Well, I'll tell you this, is that when I started on the council, I came into a spot where I essentially had both sides of the aisle in support. And as issues came in and decisions came down, it got to where it did become very contentious. There were people who had deep-rooted feelings on both sides, and that was a tough spot to be in. And what I talked about when I said, you know, you never lose, you either win or learn, I learned some pretty valuable lessons in there in that time. And I think the biggest lesson that I learned personally is that there's more than one right way to do things. And I'll be the first to admit, in that time and things, I found one right way, and I thought that was it, and I wrote it out. And then in the end, I realized that actually, you know, there's probably 2 or 3 other ways we could have handled that, and it could have been it could have been a better situation. There's definitely more than one right way to handle things. The difference that I have now versus then is I've now experienced that and realized that if you dig in your heels to pick your way, and you're going to lose your ability to be effective. You're going to lose your ability to continue to help and guide the community that you care about, that's why I got into it. I got into it because I had my family here and I wanted to see good things happen in Syracuse City. And as I dug in my heels and focused on my one way, I let 2 or 3 other options off the table. Whereas now, my approach would be much different, and it would be more of a consensus building. We're so divided on so many levels in that I really would focus as a goal as a council member in creating unity within the community and trying to bring all of those sides together.
All right. So I'm actually going to can something you said in your former speech. You said that there were a few things you feel you had missed while you were on your previous council, or things that you wish you could have done differently. And do you have a specific example of those things? And that's going to kind of tie into what would you do different this time?
So pretty much a lot of what I talked with Corinne about. So when the issues came up with the mayor and divisions of power and things and stuff like that, there was some opportunities in there for some compromises that I didn't take. And in hindsight, I would have taken, having the experience and the ability to look back on it now, I would have taken that compromise. Because what happened in that process is I lost my ability to be effective and influence and being a positive influence in the city. A person will generally, one of the studies that they went through when I went through BYU is they did a market study, and they looked at things that influence shoppers, but it's relevant to a lot of different roles in life. And what they did is they studied all these things, and you know, accessibility, parking, customer service, variety of products. And what they found is no matter how many good things you stacked on the one side, if there were one or two negative things over there on this other side, people latched onto the negative thing and they remembered the negative thing, and it influenced their decision making, their opinions, their preferences. And even though they had all these great things over there on this right side, because of these two negative things or that one negative thing, they'd latch onto that, and that's what they focused on, and that influenced their decisions. And I've thought a lot about that study and how it applies to so many different facets of life, but in politics and in government and in the issues that comes before this body, that quite often is what happens. You may end your tenure here having done 35 amazing things, but there may be that one thing that people remember or latch onto, but because it was negative, that sticks out in their mind the most. And that's another lesson that I've learned in life, is to minimize the negatives. Because in the end, people will, the positives will fade, they'll meld into the background, but they will remember the negative. And I think, going kind of to what you're saying, I would definitely working on minimizing negatives within the city. You could do that. There's a lot of, in hindsight and looking at, there's a lot of opportunities for that to happen within the city government.
I do have one question, and I'll try to be brief. You currently work for Roy City, as you've mentioned several times, in the police department. That would mean that you've got a sworn oath to Roy City. If you were appointed now, you would take a sworn oath to this city. How do you honor both?
Actually, very easy. There's not a conflict in the two processes. What I do to protect the life, health, and safety in Roy City does not negatively impact what happens in Syracuse. My job allows me a great deal of flexibility to attend meetings, represent the city, serve on boards, and make sure that my commitments within the city would be fully satisfied in this capacity.
Okay, so we're out of time, but what happens when there's a conflict? Who wins?
When they conflict, I don't see how they can conflict.
Paul, do you want to address this? Are you looking?
I'm just asking. I'm looking for his understanding. I'm not looking for
I just
legal.
wondered if Paul wanted to comment. Did you have a comment?
No, I didn't have a comment.
Okay, I misread you.
In 4 years, I've not seen them conflict when I did it before.
All right, let's move on. Lisa.
Okay, go.
Hey, I want to ask you your future plans. Same question I asked everybody.
To run or not to run, that is the question.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think it would be foolish to invest a year's worth of study and understanding and knowledge, and maybe I would want to bring that institutional knowledge from this year and from my 40 years living here into the next session and term. I think it would be a waste of everybody's time if I just intended to be here for a year and to do a little something and then walk away. So I would run again.
And then same thing I asked for Danny. You've lived here a long time.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen it go from where you could drive your bike down the middle of Antelope, drive to what it is now. So where do you see us going in the future, and how do you mesh that in your head with what you've grown up with?
Well, my children are the future, and so that gives me great perspective. I'm able to look at, I have a son who lives a block away from us and a grandbaby that will be going to school here, hopefully, if we can get him to afford a house. Anybody have any good ideas there? But anyway, we intend to keep our kids as close to us as possible. They love Syracuse. This is their home, and this is where they want to continue to live and come back once they're done with school. So I can see in 20 years, a master plan to me is where that comes into play, where you say, where do I see my children and my grandchildren? Will there be parks for them to play recreational ball in 10 years or 20 years? Will 1,000 be so consumed with traffic that we can't stand to be here? Will 1,700 be so bogged down that every residential street is consumed with traffic? Will we have so much high density? I know that we have to have a certain amount, and that's progress. And that makes it so that we can have a generation live here for a while until they can afford something more. But we have to be really careful to balance it. So I think you don't dismiss what happened over the last 50, 60, 100 years. you learn from it, you grow, and you recognize that somebody had some foresight, because that's where we are now, because somebody 20, 30, 40 years ago had a master plan.
Okay. A wise person recently told me that true leaders make tough decisions and then deal with the heat, and that others will wait until it's a crisis and say we had no choice, and then they wash their hands, or try to wash their hands of the responsibility of those choices. How will you deal with the heat, if you will, that
And
comes?
there is a lot. Just before I came here, somebody said something about the playground being built on the Syracuse Citizens page, and then said, and then we need to tell the council as if they will answer us or respond to us anyway. And your wife had a great response to that. But there is heat, and I will be honest. 10 years ago, I didn't have the skin to. It wasn't thick enough to deal with it. I was in the midst of a different season in my life and hadn't experienced some things that had allowed me to be able to stand for some things and be okay if everybody isn't my friend and doesn't adore me. And I think that just comes with age and wisdom. And when you hit half century, you can deal with some things that maybe you couldn't have a little bit ago, and it won't affect my children because they're all grown and gone. So I think that there needs to be some foresight in our decisions, and we have to be willing to say, we made this for the greater good, and we're sorry if everyone isn't happy. That is simply the way of the world and the nature of the beast. Everyone cannot be happy. It never has been. That's never been the way.
Thank you.
I think you kind of know where I'm going. So let's talk about, you do have this perspective, which is fantastic. But you also get to see kind of, as things have changed, what do we still need to do? What's left undone? To the question, what needs fixing? And then as you, if you're appointed to the council, what will you make your specific priorities that you will kind of take care of in that first year and possibly 4 or 5 years?
So what needs fixing? I would hate to look at the city and say it's broken, because I don't think it is. I think that we've had some tremendous leadership over many years, and some great things have happened. I would say a first priority would be, there's a park, the regional park, that I know that with my own children in recreational ball, we hardly ever, maybe a fistful of times, did we attend a practice or a game within our own city limits, and yet it was city ball. We were in West Point and Clinton the majority of the time, and Clearfield even. And I remember thinking that was odd, that we were paying our fees to our own city and yet taking advantage of another field. And I don't know if that has to do with population, but I do know that there's a need. When I was on the board recently, we were planning a Flag Day celebration, and our first thought was for Davis County was to go to Barnes Park, because they have what I would consider a regional park with large fields and open areas and places for people to gather. And it was the first thought that all of the board members had. And I would like Syracuse to be the first thought for that, and to bring some people further west into our city and have them see what we have to offer. So I wouldn't say that there's anything that needs to be fixed as much as there needs to be some things planned and some foresight into the future. And then, so what was your other question? I've lost it. What was that? Oh, first priority. That would be to listen to all of the council members to see what you believe is pressing. Somebody asked if I had been involved in a lot of city council meetings, and the truth is no. I haven't prioritized this because I've had other things on my plate up until this point in my life, and at different times in your life, you're in a different season and you have the capacity to pile some things on. And at this point, I would love to glean from you what you've learned in your terms, see what you think is most pressing, get to know our staff and see what they think is most pressing, and mostly I would like to listen for a bit and do some study on my own.
So I'm going to preface this question by saying this, that I think, and of course I'm biased on this on the first part, but I think that we've been able to accomplish quite a bit in the last 3 years that I've been here. Not because of me personally, but because several council members have taken a very active role outside of the normal things like just a meeting. Are you in a season in your life where you're ready to invest your time and energy, not just in the city, but outside of the city, trying to bring things back here?
Absolutely. That's a, what would you have done if I'd said no?
But I'd like you to speak.
Clearly, I am, as I said, I'm a half century. I've hit that mark. My lips are thinning, my hair is thinning, and nothing else is. But that means that I'm through with some things. I've been melancholy about some of the changes that have taken place in my own personal life and some of my priorities and the things that I used to feel like I had control over and could delve into. Those things are gone now. Even being on community council for Clearfield High, my children have graduated, all of them, from that school, and so therefore that's no longer something I can even if I wanted to, I couldn't be involved in it. But I plan on being here until, as I said in one of my notes, until I can haunt my children from Syracuse soil. And so I plan to be here, and so this is where I will invest my time, and I do not work outside of the home. I volunteer outside of the home, and that's one of the greatest assets, I believe, that I bring to this table, that I have the time, that I'm not leaving this city every day for several hours at a time and coming home at rush hour. I'm here during the day so I can go take a look at that regional park. I can go see what's going on with the wetlands. I can go see where they want some high density and take some pictures. I was just in Logan the other day and saw a 3-story office building on the corner, and I thought, what were we talking about for that council, that land study? That was 4 stories. This is imposing. I want to see what that would actually entail. So yes, I am at a season in my life where this is open to me and I can invest a lot of time and effort.
Okay. I'm good.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Council?
Well, I know everybody wants to feel like there's a lot of discussion to happen, and I really feel like conclusions are easy to come by at this point. There are a lot of great candidates, but from the get-go, all 4 of us voted for one person, and there's only one person that all 4 of us had on our first cut, and that hasn't changed for me. I think that right now, we have to look very clearly at a couple of things. The person who's leaving the council, with all due respect, represented a part of the city. We don't serve, everyone serves at large. We don't serve districts, but we're in a unique position because we kind of are spread out throughout the city. And the person that we all had on our list fills that area of the city west of or east of 1000 that Andrea came from. So we would be continuing that. I also see a lot of the same things that Andrea brought to the council in Lisa Bingham. So I would jump right in and make a motion that we appoint Lisa Bingham.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I will second.
I have a second. Any other discussion?
I really want to make comments about all of them because I commend you, Dave, for stepping in and making the first motion because we don't want this to be contentious. I probably would have voted for any of these 4 that had been brought forward. I look at Grant, who has great experience in our planning commission as the chair, and I don't really know Grant, and as I listened to him today, I was very impressed. I have said this before, and I put a lot of stock into the fact that Seth has run for office, and he's the only one here that had the guts to do that before. I would have voted for him. I think Danny has some great experience, having been on the council, and very eloquently addressed what he learned for good and bad from that experience. I would have voted for him. But I'm very supportive of Lisa. And the biggest thing that I wrote down here in my notes is what you've already addressed, Dave, is that I think she feels a lot of the things that were of value about having Andrea Anderson on our council. And Lisa brings those same attributes.
I do want to be clear that jumping to that step, it has no negative reflection on the other candidates. You all have great things to bring to the table. But I found that in the past, sometimes we try to debate so much that maybe somebody's feelings get caught up in one little tidbit that maybe pushed it over the other. The last time we had an appointment to make was when Jordan Savage was here, and I did the exact same thing. There was one person that everyone chose on the first ballot, and because it was consensus, I jumped right to Jordan, and he's been an asset, and we've all worked with him well. So to me, that was kind of the thing that I think is invaluable, is that all of us felt the same way on one person. So it's not a negative reflection on any of the rest of you.
Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Did you get that recorded, Cassie?
That was supposed to be roll call, but yes.
We don't have any opposing votes, so it stands unanimous. I want to just make one little comment from history. If any of you know me, I'm a storyteller. I like stories. I learn from stories. Colonel Chamberlain was a member of the Civil War Union on the Union side, and he was instrumental in Gettysburg. Maybe without his brigade that was there, the war may have turned in one different direction. It was brought to him just before Gettysburg. He got 120 mutineers from Maine that they were given the choice. They either had to fight or he had the right to shoot them. They could come and join the forces that would go to Gettysburg, or he could shoot them. And in his diary, he writes, of course, I would never have shot any one of them, but he gave a little address to that group of people, and most of what he said there is true and could be applied today. He began his statement by, some people fight wars for a number of reasons: for loot, for land, for women, that all kinds of wars have been fought over all kinds of things. And he said, you know, and in that day it was true, he said that we have land, we have lots of land. There will always be more land until 2018. And it is proposed that within the next 15 years that there will be no major developmental property in Davis County. But that's not why I mentioned it. What I want to mention is what he said. He said the important thing about why we're here, and they were on the battlefield pre-Gettysburg, he said, when it boils down to it, all there is us, and all we have is us, and all there is that can come to the battle are those of us that are here. And we have to decide whether or not we want to fight for each other's honor. The only thing that we can fight for really of any value is the honor that we owe each other. Now, one of the things that I love about this community, one of the things that's always been here, has been displayed here tonight. We have honorably selected a replacement for our peer. We loved Andrea. We still love Andrea. She brought something to this council that we need and we miss. Lisa, we're going to love you. And those are the rest of you who applied. Please don't give up on us. Seth, run. Again, will you, Grant? Run. We'd love to have you on this council someday and participating in it. Danny, we appreciate you and appreciate what you've done over the years. You have left a legacy here, and we see it. We see it in things that are existing now. And all the others that have left, we really appreciate you're willing to participate. Now, it's my honor to turn this meeting over to Cassie to swear Councilwoman Bingham into office.
Okay, raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Lisa Bingham,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of Utah,
and the Constitution of Utah,
and that I will discharge the duties
and that I will discharge the duties
of the office of City Council Member
of the office of City Council Member
with fidelity.
with fidelity.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks so much.
Welcome. You can take your place either at this end.
Yes.
Well, welcome. This brings us to the point in time in our meeting this evening where we will reopen for public comment. If you have something that you'd like to say to the council, we'd invite you to come forward. Again, if you'd state your name and place of residence, we'll again have to limit to 3 minutes. Anybody would like to address the council? Seth?
Seth Teague, 2032 West, 1100 South here in Syracuse. I just want to congratulate you, first of all. You did an admirable job, and I think that you'll do a great job on the council. Hearing from your feedback and your answers, it seems like you're prepared and ready to take on these challenges. And so I want to welcome you to this team and say good luck on this first year. And thank you guys for the process.
Thank you. Anyone else? Chief?
You're walking a little funny, Chief.
I know, it's right there. Mayor and Council, I just wanted to give you an update from our Guns and Hoses event last night. So we haven't gone through the second count of the money, but I wanted to let you know we raised somewhere in the neighborhood of $10,500 last night. Combine that with what we've raised over the past couple of months in the different events we've done in the city. I think we're right about 22,500. So Syracuse High School they've been doing a little fundraiser over at the school. I think there's a pretty good chance we end up hitting our $25,000 mark. So we appreciate your support. I know we had a lot of help from a lot of different employees on a committee to get this going. It took a lot of time and a lot of effort, but I think we had a pretty successful event. And when you see those 5 kids there, it certainly makes you know why you're doing it. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you for your leadership.
And I'd like to thank both the police and the firefighters. They were excellent, and it was a very impressive, well-run event.
The talent on the court, not so much, but everything else was a lot of fun.
I don't know, the guns team had a ringer over there. They had a ringer on their side. Yeah.
They both would have done better if we'd have taken the lid off the basket.
Okay, unless there's more comment, I'll close public comment. Let's, council, do you have things that you'd like to share with the public here before we recess it back into a work session?
I'll just take a second to thank all of the various people that were involved in our disaster preparedness fair that was held last Saturday. Great turnout. A lot of people put a lot of time into that, especially our disaster preparedness committee. If you're listening, fantastic job. It's the volunteers in this city that just make it great. As these people come out and volunteer their time and perform all these services, and I could name tons and tons of volunteers that just spend a lot of time on these things, and just thank you. That this city is run by people who are willing to step out of their shell and do something. And so thank you to all of those that did that, and thank you for all of you that came out tonight to volunteer your time to apply for this position. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan.
Nothing new on the, is it coming to me?
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Nothing new on the Parks Committee. We will meet on the 19th to hopefully come up with something that we can forward to the council.
Okay.
We have mosquito abatement tomorrow, so nothing at this time. You got my planning commission report, and that's all.
Thank you. David?
Thursday, we will be approving a budget at the sewer board that will be several $1 million less than last year's budget. But before you all get excited that there's a bunch of extra money, it will be put in savings for another capital project so that we don't have to raise fees in the future. I would like to thank the Arts Council for the wonderful choir concert that was here last Friday. The mayor, thank you for coming. and remind you that the Symphony Orchestra will be performing with Eclipse 6 next week. Get your tickets. It'll be a wonderful opportunity. We have a wonderful guest artist.
Lisa, do you want to respond?
No, but thank you. I will choose to stay silent at this point, but thanks.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes.
may I really quick? I am sorry. I meant to thank the candidates again. As I walked in with Dave, he said that he hated this process, and throughout this whole thing, I just wish that we could disappear into the floor and let it just be magically happen.
I think we should add a couple more seats.
But thank you.
Yeah, there's one right here.
Thank you for who you are. You make us all better, and we appreciate you.
I would like to add something really quick. As I read through the packet and I saw all of the resumes from the people that were submitting their names for this position, it was impressive to say the least, and I'm just really grateful that such high caliber people ran for a position that is a thankless job and gets people mad at you all the time, and that you're willing to put yourselves in that position. It was an incredible group of people, so thank you for running for those positions, or that position.
Thank you. Brody, do you have something for this group?
Only that the monthly manager's report has been sent out, and we'll get Councilmember Bingham set up for that. And there won't be we don't have anything for closed session tonight, too. That was on the agenda, too, but we don't have
I'll
anything.
pass on that.
Dave, can you see it yet?
What?
The city
No, I
manager's
cannot see
report?
it. I still cannot see it.
Let's get him set up too.
I would like that. I emailed you about that.
It's a good report. I'll just let you know.
I appreciate that. It's a conflict, clearly, that I have too many MS and 365 accounts. So, all right. So without a motion to go into closed session, are we motion to adjourn?
Well, we're gonna recess into work session. We've got one item we've got to discuss for just a minute.
And I'll make a motion that we recess into work session.
You want to adjourn this one? Okay.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Okay. So
I'll second.
second, first, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you for coming.